Hello everybody, and welcome back to 4FS Gaming. This is Doc, and today I am making right on my promise in the last video to cover the last aerial unit in the game, the First Order Jet Trooper. And by the end of this video, hopefully you will all understand why he really needed his own video. We'll be going over his base stats, abilities, and how you can best use them to get an advantage over your enemies. Starting off swiftly as we always do with his base stats. He has 200 base health, up to 240 with star cards, and in typical reinforcement fashion, he'll regenerate 40 health per second after 6 seconds, and this can be up to 100 health per second with star cards. Why is it not 140 health like all the other videos I've been doing from the reinforcements? Well, that's because that's not actually how the star card works, and I've been mistaken this entire time. And after trying it out in a different setup, I finally realized that. Nothing I can do about it now though. But back on topic. Instead of using rolls, he just uses 2 jet dashes that offer much more distance than rolling, while still having the same 20% damage reduction for the entire duration. And with star cards, you can get 3 of them with shorter cooldowns, and these dashes are much more important on the First Order Jet Trooper for reasons we'll get into when we look at his jetpack. But before we do that, let's take a look at his one and only ability that he really has, the Jet Tackle. The Jet Tackle behaves very similarly to all of the other charging bashes in the game, with one very important difference: it is much faster. There's a slight delay after activating it, a short initial animation, and then the trooper will launch forward at high speed until the duration runs out, you cancel it early, or you hit someone. If you activate the ability while standing still, there will be an extra almost 2-second delay before the dash starts, however, so be sure to start sprinting before you activate it. The dash itself, once it starts, lasts for 2 seconds and carries you really far, almost giving you the ability to travel from one end of a blast map to the other if the map has a path long enough. If you hit an enemy with the tackle, you'll deal 150 damage to them and knock down anything you don't kill outright, making them an easy target for you and your team. It then has a pretty lengthy cooldown of 32 seconds, which is honestly terrible for an ability like this. And in all seriousness, the ability is something I hardly ever use and genuinely forget he has sometimes. Because in order to land it, you have to get close to your opponents, which is not where the First Order aerial excels, not even close. So I use the ability more as a mobility tool to get into or out of combat more than a actual combat ability, and even then I only really consider using it if my jetpack is out of fuel. And speaking of the jetpack, I think it's time we look at the most unique jetpack in the game, and maybe even the best jetpack in the game. Let's take a look at it. You can activate this jetpack one of 3 ways when on the ground. You can hold down whatever your left ability button is, you can hold the jump button down, or you can walk off the edge of the terrain while aiming down your sights. That third method takes advantage of the jetpack's main gimmick, the fact that you can hover in the air for a lot longer than you can fly through it. In terms of total flight time, here's what I came up with from testing. If you have a full tank, you can fly at full throttle for 9 seconds. You can increase the total flight time by not holding down the jump key for the entire duration of the flight, and instead use it in short bursts. You'll conserve fuel this way and travel much farther. If you decide to hover, you can have a max hover time of 32 seconds, but you will only get this full duration if you walk off a ledge and go straight into hover mode. While you are hovering, you are very slow, and are exposed to whatever fire comes your way. There is one thing you can do to mitigate damage while airborne though. You have full access to your dodges while in the air, no matter what you're doing, and they will recharge even when you are in the air, hovering, or flying around. There are no real downsides to using the dashes mid-air either. The only penalty you suffer is you lose a round of second of flight time for whichever mode of travel you're using, so flight time will go down to 8 seconds for full throttle and 31 seconds for hover, roughly. If you just dash without going back into either flight mode though, you will lose about 1/8 of your tank, so be sure to pay attention to that if you're going to fly over a bottomless pit. But you won't really have to pay much attention to it in all honesty, since the tank starts refilling after 3.5 seconds on the ground, and it only takes 2 seconds to refill the tank from empty to full. One other important thing to note about the jetpack is that you can capture objectives while hovering over them, but only at low altitude, and some allow you to be higher than others while still being inside the objective, so kind of get a feel for each of the objectives that you have access to the aerial. Oh, but now we are getting to the bread and butter of the First Order Jet Trooper, the G125 projectile launcher / blaster rifle. Out of all the aerial blasters in Battlefront 2, this one has by far the lowest DPS of any of them. In fact, it has one of the lowest overall DPS values in the game, but it has a very nice set of gimmicks that make it stand out from most of the weapons in this game, and make up for the lacking raw damage output. First of all, let's look at that raw damage. Each shot does 20 damage out to 20 meters, and 5 damage past 40 meters, so the DPS is about 83. But the bolts also have an explosive effect, with each explosion having the same damage range as the bolts, 20 damage max and 5 minimum, with the 20 damage being dealt within 1 meter of impact and the minimum damage cutting off completely past 2 meters. So if you land all of your shots at close range, your DPS is actually around 166, and it drops down to around 104 past 40 meters, which isn't a huge loss, since the explosions don't lose damage over distance, only the bolts themselves do. You can fire 25 shots before overheating, and it has a very short 1-second manual cooling cycle, and the weapon has no recoil at all, and little to no spread as well, making it incredibly easy to land shots at any range. But even if you overheat, you have a backup weapon system to use. The tri-barrel projectile launcher. This weapon can be swapped to at any time using your right ability button, and is a completely separate weapon from the main blaster, meaning they each have their own overheat bars. So if one overheats, you can switch to the other while you wait for the other to cool down. There is almost no delay from switching weapons and no cooldown from switching either, so switch as much as you need to. The launcher itself is really straightforward. Once you switch to it, you can fire 3 projectiles, one every second, that fly in a very lazy and pronounced arc, making long-range shots difficult to land. Once you fire all 3, the weapon will go into its overheat cycle. Each projectile does 70 damage maximum within 2 meters of the explosion, and like most other explosives, they deal 5 damage minimum at 6 meters away. That is 210 damage within 2 seconds of firing the first projectile, meaning that you can kill any trooper and non-upgraded, non-battle droid aerial outright, and seriously damage anything else. They also do pretty good damage to vehicles, but they don't get any bonuses like anti-armor grenades do. So overall, the Jet Trooper of the First Order is exceptional at what it does, which is suppressing and annoying the hell out of enemies that it shoots at. Heavies can't effectively block you with their shields, since the explosive bolts and projectiles will mostly or completely ignore them. The damage can also sometimes bleed through squad and personal shields, so officers and specialists have to be careful when trying to protect themselves on low health. You can still easily damage enemies that are rolling or dodging around the place because you don't have to hit them directly to deal damage. And finally, my favorite thing to do as the Jet Trooper is to absolutely ruin lightsaber heroes. So long as you're careful and stay high enough out of range of force abilities or time your dodges to avoid them or lightsaber swings when they jump up to try and get you, there's pretty much nothing they can do to you while you have no problem using your 2 different kinds of explosives to ignore their blocks. You administer them a savage death of 1,000 cuts, slowly wearing them down and forcing them to run away. The First Order really has my favorite aerial, for the simple fact that their kit of abilities and weapon mesh really well together with each other. And even though the jet tackle isn't great, it still has its uses and doesn't really have a negative effect on the Jet Trooper, even though the Jet Trooper is effectively missing its middle ability. But that's about it for this video on the First Order aerial Jet Trooper. Now then, what's it going to be for the next Star Wars Battlefront 2 video, I wonder? I'm not entirely sure. I still have a lot of footage saved up for a lot of different topics, so the next one will be a surprise for now, even to me. In the meantime, if you want anything to be looked at in particular, feel free to leave a comment and let me know, and I will try to make it happen. But this has been Doc from 4FS Gaming. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I sincerely hope to see you all in the next one as well.